Hi, glad you could join us. I'm Annette Sherman. The program is called Community, and there's a very good reason why the program is called Community, because it's about our community and the people who live part-time or full-time in our community or visit our community. So we've got the community covered. And if you live in Sarasota, we'd love you to be our viewer, to watch what we're talking about or to meet the people that we have here as guests. Today I have a very special guest. She's special in many ways. She's a very, very talented person and a very energetic person with her talents, and that's plural, talents. And you probably have seen some of her work, maybe even bought or read some of her work, because she really is an excellent writer. And what she writes about, well, she finds subjects that are interesting to most everyone who lives in our area. Let me introduce my very special guest, and her name, and it's a real name, is Kim Kuhl. Welcome, Kim.
It's so nice to be here again.
I haven't seen you in a long time, and my assistant said to me, "Oh, Kim Kuhl, didn't know you." She said, has called us, and do we have time for her on the show? I said, absolutely. We make time if necessary. And she didn't, well, she was very happy to learn about you, and I think you made a fan even before she starts to read what you've written. Tell me about Kim Kuhl. In other words, tell me about where you're from, about your childhood. Don't go into extreme detail, because we want to get to all those books that you've written.
Right.
But a little bit about your background and about your family and about all those things.
Well, I was an only child, grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I had to be my father's son and my mother's daughter, so by the time I was 7, I was playing golf, but I was also learning to cook and knit and things like that. Then I discovered ice skating a couple years later and took that up. My father really wanted me to continue with golf, but I loved ice skating. And I've pursued that all my life, becoming a national skating judge, something I've done now for 52 years. I can't believe that. I graduated from Shaker Heights High School, went to Sweetbriar College for Women in Virginia, was active in all sorts of things there.
How did you find out about Sarasota and Venice?
My parents were looking for a place to retire, and they kept coming down to the Sarasota-Venice area, bought a place in 1966, and they were snowbirds, as most people are for a while. And when they passed away about 25 years ago, I ended up with their condominium in Venice, and I was traveling so much judging ice skating all over the place.
You traveled so much because you wanted to travel, vacation kind of travel, or was it a business thing?
No, it was to judge ice skating. It's my volunteer activity.
How did you come to ice skating?
Well, when you grow up in the north and you have access to ice rinks, as I did, it was just fun. I was never going to be a champion, but I loved it and had a lot of friends. I have friends today that we grew up together on ice skating. One of my best friends and I used to summer ice skate in Canada every summer.
Do you still skate?
No, I don't skate anymore, but I still judge.
Okay, yes.
I was up in Lake Placid, New York this fall.
The word still doesn't mean sitting idle.
No.
Your word, when you use still, that means you've done this for many, many years. I've known you, gosh, at least 30, 35 years. And when I first had you on the program, I was amazed at how much vigor you used, how much energy you used in what you did, and how much you seemed to enjoy every minute of it, as if you had selected, and I think that is the case, that you had selected judging ice skating, or you had selected writing books about subject matter that these trips, that the cool trips. And I kept every one of them for a long time, because everybody asked me, if Kim was on the program, they'd say, do you really know her that well? I said, I think I do. I have all of her books. When she comes on the program, she brings them, and then she makes a gift of them to me, which is the best part of the whole thing, because I get to read them.
That's why you invite me on.
No, well, yes and no, Kim, because yes, I love your books, and I read them.
That's really
and
nice.
They can be in my bookcase here at the studio, and someone will come along and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know she had written all those books. I had read one of her books." And then you wrote the book about ghost stories, and you
Right.
got very caught up in ghost stories. I don't know if it's in this
I've met some
particular-
interesting people because of the ghost stories, so that's
who
been
believed
fun.
in ghosts.
Some who believe and some who absolutely do not believe.
But of course,
But it doesn't matter. I think it's history light, and it's kind of an interesting way to present
Yeah.
the history of an interesting area.
yeah. But whether they believed in them or whether they just thought they exist. Now, is that part and parcel of believing in them if they think ghosts exist?
I think some people admit to the possibility of ghosts. Some people are absolutely adamant there is no such thing,
Yeah. Huh?
and other people are adamant that there are
Is such a
ghosts.
thing.
Yeah.
Ghosts can be good or bad.
I haven't really experienced any terrible ones. I think the bad ones are all in the movies. The other ones, I think, are possibly after we die, if we don't move on to wherever we're supposed to go next, maybe we're in limbo. It seems like they're looking for something.
Well, it's a fascinating topic that has really no limits, and I'm sure as many extensions as you can find about
Right.
ghosts. There are more people that have additional thoughts and additional
Oh,
stories
absolutely.
to tell you about ghosts.
Everybody
And
has an interpretation.
How did you get involved or interested in ghost stories?
Well, my father used to tell me ghost stories when I was little, but I sort of put that in the back of my mind until I was on a press trip to Walt Disney World years ago and met a man, Charles Adams III, who has written about 30-some books just on ghost stories. And he said, "You should do ghost stories of Venice." And I said, "Well, I haven't heard a single ghost story about Venice," but, you know, I had written books at that point in another field. So I thought, well, that might be interesting. So I went home and asked the archivist and asked various people. And it took me about 4 months to gather enough stories for the skinniest little book you've ever seen. But I came out with that first book. And in trying to find stories for the first book, some people said, well, there's no such thing. And after the book was printed, those same people said,
Came out of
why
the woodwork.
didn't you write the story of such and such? And I said, because you told me there were no such things. So anyway, one thing led to another, and then I was invited to bring some psychics to the Ringling Mansion, to Katazan, to see if there were ghosts there.
If you had to cast your vote, are there such things, and you can cast yes or no, are there such things as ghosts as we believe in ghosts?
I think there's something, and I
some,
don't...
some essence there.
Some essence, because we're energy. And, you know, if you study physics, energy doesn't disappear. It's there. It may move. So when we die, maybe our energy...
You can call them ghosts, you can call them spirits, you can call them a
Whatever,
lot of things, but
whatever
there's
you
something
want.
there.
I think so.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
As many of your books, as I respond to many of your books, in other words, this is such a thing as a typical response
Right.
to a Kim Cool book, or if there's such a thing as a typical Kim Cool book at all. I don't think so. When someone thinks, well, it's all about short trips, cool trips, you come up with another thought, another whole trend of thought.
Well, we have such a wealth of information to share in this area. You know.
You find it so. There are other authors who don't have enough to write about. They never quite have enough to write about.
Yeah.
Kim Cool, Kimcoll. I asked you this, but I'm going to ask you again. Kim is your given name, your
Right.
parents. Okay. Is Cool really your family name?
No, I married Kenneth Cool. And so that's how I acquired the name.
What was originally your family name?
Patmore, Patmore.
Cool
There's
is
an
better.
English poet named Coventry Patmore who is in the family.
But Kim Cool is
It's a great
trippingly
name.
on the tongue. It sort of works. And Cool Books and the whole designation of cool by the younger generation.
It's perfect. Yes, exactly.
Yes, it's perfectly perfect. I would recommend any and all, and I'm going to go through the ones that she brought copies of, of Kim Cool's books. Number one, the subject matter is generally something that is interesting, fascinating, and probably something that a group of people hold very dear. Now, it doesn't have to be ghosts, but it could be whatever the subject matter. This is ghost stories, the Circus Days. Well, so many circus lovers here. And these are only 4 books. How many books have you written?
About 30 overall, and I think 14 or 15 about Florida things.
Turtle Tales. Tell about that.
That one came about because one of the bookstores that sells a lot of my books knew that I write about turtles all the time for the Venice Gondolier Sun. And they said, you should write a book about turtles. And I had been down here about 20 years at that point and said, okay, well, that would be fun. So I set out to do this book, and then I thought, I was an artist in Cleveland. Why don't I see if I can still paint? And I went out into the garage, and I got all my paints out, and I had not opened a tube of any of the acrylics for 20 years. When I opened the first tube, it was like brand new. My brushes were all in good shape, but I was still too cheap to buy good watercolor paper. So I took a piece of computer paper, and I said, I'll see if I can paint a turtle on this. That became the cover. That's Turbo, the little guy on the front of the cover. And he literally was painted on computer paper.
I have yet to find, and Kim used to send me, because she'd be on my program as often as I could get her. And she's a very busy lady. I mean, among your things that you do, you work, you tell it.
Well, I work full-time at the Gondolier Sun in Venice. I'm the features editor, which I think is wonderful for me because I'm an eclectic personality, as you know. So I cover all the theater in the area and the arts. I could be at the Art Center one day. I could be at Venice Theater. I could be up at the Oslo. I go to previews of the shows.
It would seem that you would be a woman who would say, a person who would say, I don't have any more time to devote to anything because I really want to write my next book.
There's always time. You know?
For you, you make it. You make the time because you want to do it, and it's exciting for you, and the completion of it is important to you as well.
It's going to keep me busy till I'm 140. I've got so much to do and so many things to learn, and I'm like a little sponge, I guess.
Obviously, I know you have a tremendous following, because when I have you on, I'll have calls about this program. Are you going to repeat that program? I understand you had Kim Cool on, and I love her work. I read everything she writes.
That's nice.
Well, you have a tremendous following. Now, you know that. Because
I know
of
I
the
have
sale
a
of your
few
books.
fans, and from the sale of books, but that's very nice to hear.
That to me is a following. People who would shell out money to buy a book and buy another book just because Kim Cool wrote it is a tribute, and it is a certain amount of affection for the work that you do, and that's wonderful. That's better than the money.
It is.
The friends that they love your work, and they love your thinking, and they love your attitude, and they love what you have to say. So it is wonderful. If you want to be one of those people, if you haven't already, and I'm sure many of you have, the books that Kim just brought, Circus Days, Turtle Tales. Is this your newest book?
No, actually, the newest book is the one about Sweetbriar College, which has nothing to do with Florida and not going to sell here.
Ghost Stories of Fort Myers. If you're into ghosts, I know you did another book, I think. I don't know if it's another book or if it's part of this one, with theater people.
Yes, there's haunted theaters.
There's another one.
That's all the theaters.
Who seem to be very much into ghosts and that kind of thing backstage, and you cover that, and it was stays in my mind, so it must have been interesting.
Well, every theater has a ghost light, so why not a ghost also to go with the ghost light?
Then you have your college, who I understand took this and are using this in some way.
Well, I wrote it. In 2015, we had a questionable board of directors, and they were about to close the college. And there's only 40 women's colleges left. So a lot of us jumped on the bandwagon, and they had shut us out from everything. But using social media, we amassed 12,000 alumni in 4 days. We raised $28 million in about 2 weeks, and we got an injunction from the Supreme Court of Virginia to get rid of the board and the president, get an interim president, and save the college. And I was laid up with hip surgery at the time, and I couldn't really help them, so I stayed watching Facebook and watching the progression of everything that everyone did, ask them to send me pictures and tell me what was happening.
And they were only too happy to do it.
They were great, and I wrote the book, had it printed, and it's my way of donating to the college. So I spent the money to have it printed, and all the money's going to the college.
There are lots and lots. How many books have you written?
I think about 30 overall.
Okay, it feels like more because I have them and I save them, and every once in a while when someone will call me and ask me, do I have such and such a book, and I'll direct them to Amazon. Let me direct you to Amazon. If you want to order any of these books, it's probably the easiest way, Amazon.com. And or they are available at
Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble. Or
Venice Stationers has them in Venice.
Okay.
And the archives in Venice, the Venice Museum, they sell all my books.
Okay. The point is that they're very available, and you certainly can get them locally if you want them locally.
The Sweetbriar book, you need to go to Sweetbriar to have it.
If you want to, if you choose to, I'm going to put that phone number on the screen, please. My people in the control room, would you put that number on the screen? There it goes. Leave it on there so you can call Kim. Now, she's local. You can call Kim and ask her about such and such a book. If a friend of yours has the book and you'd like to get a copy of it, you can get it directly. Or, as I said, Amazon.com, or go to Barnes & Noble.
Yes, they carry most of them.
It's a very popular, she's a very popular author, and particularly in her well, it's not her hometown, but she's made it her hometown of Sarasota, because she writes a lot about Sarasota. Circus Days in Sarasota and Venice. That's a delightful book and very well written.
Thank
as
you.
they all are. And
that one we're giving the proceeds to. We're having a new circus museum that's going to be in Venice. I've been on the committee for a million years. We purchased a former Ringling train car, and it's going to be at the depot in Venice, next to the Gunther Gebel-Williams statue and a caboose that we have there. And it will be dedicated to the history of the circus as it was in Venice.
Well, I think, although you're not homegrown, you weren't born here, but you didn't have to be. You did all your research, and you do all your research very, very well for each of your books. And I said this before, they're quite well written. I would recommend unashamedly, unabashedly, any of the books, not just one, although I have favorites, but so many of them because they're all well written. And the trip books, they still, how many trip books did you write?
3 of them.
Oh, is that all? Okay. Because I know I had 3 of them and I gave them to friends, and I'm sorry I did, but that's okay.
Well, we'll get you more copies.
I don't have the time to travel anymore, but I like to recommend them to people that do, and you've done such a good job of putting them together. You had
I had a reviewer from Naples Magazine, who was talking about my Southwest Florida road trips, and she said, I keep a stash in my guest room, and if somebody stays too long, I hand them a book and say, why don't you go enjoy some of these places?
Very, very well done. And needless to say, because I think the tribute is very clear when people buy your books and buy them in large quantity and guide them as gifts. They're an excellent gift idea for someone who lives here, perhaps has not lived here very long, and would like to know about some of these things, Circus Days in Sarasota and Venice. Turtle Tales, this is adorable.
Thank you.
It really is adorable. It's a nice gift for well, any age that can read will probably enjoy it.
Well, I made the head of the turtle program at Moat read it cover to cover, so it's factually correct with one change. The 3 little turtles are friends, which they would not be in real life. But
they're all wonderful, and if it has the name Kim Cool on it, you can rest assured it was done with not only skill and talent, but with a certain attitude. An attitude being that she wants you to enjoy the book. It's not just that she's writing another book. She's got a subject that she thinks you're interested in, and she's going to write a book or 2 or 3 on that subject.
I'm passionate about this area. We're the culture capital of Florida, possibly the world. We're so special here, you know, with the circus history and the planned city of Venice, things like that. Katazan, you know, wonderful
I think
place.
I'm going to start a Kim Cool Club and for young women. I'll tell you why. Because I think you're a wonderful example of how a woman can make a decision that you love doing this. And there are subjects that interest you, and because they interest you, you want to get more information on them.
Yes.
And write a book. And I think you do it out of love rather than supporting yourself with it. I'm
Right.
sure that helps too, because it encourages you and allows you to come up with a very good-looking book and a very well-produced
It gives me a little extra money I can use for travel, which is I love traveling, so. But
fascinating.
But mostly I love learning.
Woman, fascinating mind, and a fascinating, talented author, Kim Cool. And let's put that number on the screen. If you have a question, you may have a question, you may want to get Kim to speak at your group. And she does a beautiful job of that, talking about her books and researching them and that kind of thing becomes very, very interesting when Kim explains it to you. There's the telephone number on the screen that you can reach Kim Cool if you'd like to, and find out more about what's coming up, find out more about her job, because this is a woman that doesn't sit still. She's working her job at the
Venice Gondolier Sun.
Venice Gondolier, and has for ever since I've known you.
22 years.
Is it 22 years?
It seems like yesterday. It's.
I bet.
It's
I bet.
just so
and
much fun.
You don't change. You stay the same.
No.
And I mean in looks. And I'm delighted to see you. So let's make this an annual event.
Absolutely.
Come
it'd be
back,
great.
and you probably have a new book each time you're on the program.
Well, you never know.
Now, if you want to get, again, if you would like to get any of these books that I have today, you can order them directly. Just call up Kim Cool and order them if you want to talk about it. Or you can go to Amazon.com or by internet, or you can go to Barnes & Noble, which is kind of fun because you can sit down and take a book out and read some of it and then buy it to read the rest of it and know which ones you want. But I assure you, you're probably going to, once you start, you get hooked because they're easy reading, they're very comprehensive, and they're fun. I don't know if you can ask for any more than that.
No, they've been fun to do.
Well, you're still loving it. Keep on for a long, long time.
Thank you, I will.
What haven't you written about that you want to?
Oh, golly. I think you stumped me. I don't know. I think the whole world is, willing to. There's subjects everywhere. I just have to decide now, I guess.
Well, we're
I've pretty much done the ghost thing.
The turtle tales. Mm-hmm. How did this come about?
That was simply because a bookstore owner said you really ought to do a book about sea turtles.
Now, it says here it's written and illustrated. You also are an artist?
Yes. Well, I was an artist in Cleveland for 20 years. I had owned a needlework store. And that's where I started writing books, actually, because one of our publishers, who was the third largest craft publisher in the country, said to my partner and I, you've been in business so long, why don't you write a book about how to run a needlework store? So we wrote a business book, and we actually knocked it out in 2 weeks. And then he took us to 6 trade shows every year, paid all the expenses. It was the glory days of publishing. So he paid all the expenses, took us everywhere, and we sold books to other retailers. And then, because he knew we were artists, he said, well, can you design some cross-stitch books? So we did that, and a lot of them were books that are just little paperback books that sold for $5 at Michael's and Frank's and places like that. And they were runaway hits. I mean, they would get orders for 50,000 books. Because if you're dealing with Michael's, which has stores all over the country, and we might get 10 cents a copy for each of us for the book, but it added up.
Obviously. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you haven't written about that's like in a special place, a burning desire, or a desire to cover, but you just haven't had the time, or you haven't had the occasion to deal with it?
Something with international travel, because I've been fortunate enough, I've been all over the world except for Antarctica. And because I spend so much time in ice skating rinks, I don't need to go to Antarctica. But I've been everywhere else, and I just haven't come up with what I would write about travel that would be as good as a lot of the
Maybe-
travel books out there.
Maybe the groups that go, rather than going by yourself, to go with a group who are also interested in what you're interested in. That probably is a neat thing to do, particularly for people who are over a certain age, to go with a group because they're interested in lakes or bodies of water. I mean, but that might be an interesting thing to do, and start your own travel organization. You certainly have the skill for it and the experience for it.
Yeah. I guess because I'm an only child, I've always plunged out there by myself, or with my daughter and I go someplace special every year. We're going on a transatlantic cruise in the spring, and we're going to end up in Amsterdam and Copenhagen, which we have not been
You
to.
remind me, my husband used to say that he loved to read. And he said it happened because he found a little library, one of those storefront libraries,
Right.
which is up in the Bronx in New York,
Okay.
where he was from. And he said he would go and he would get this little stool, and he'd sit on it. He was so young; we only got a minute, and he'd read those books. And we were going. I don't know if we have time. We were going back into New York, and I didn't like to drive. I'd rather fly. But he said, "I'm going to drive, and I'm going to see if that library is still there." And he did, and when he came back, and he said, "You wouldn't believe this, Annette. I got there, and they were taking getting funding for an extension of the library." And he said that he said he's going to make a contribution, and he told the librarian about coming as a child. And he said, I shouldn't have done it, but I marked my name with my penknife in that stool. So she said, "We have that stool."
Oh,
They
of
remodeling,
course.
and we've got to say goodbye. So it was a happy ending, and this is a happy ending. Come on, soon
Thank
again.
you so much for having me. It's been
Pleasure
fun.
having you, Kim.
The time really flew. We bid you adieu from Community. If you want to know why we love it here, so check out Community. Well, it's a who's who, a what's, when, and where show. It's a mover and shakers who care show.